Fiona, please join me on the stage here. So we have Fiona Finn from Unbounce, and she's going to talk about the alternative go-to-market strategy. Fiona, how's it going?
Good. How are you? Can you hear me okay?
Can hear you perfectly. I see
Perfect.
everything perfectly as well. So
Perfect.
yeah, take it away. The stage is yours.
Awesome. Okay, I'm just gonna set up to share my screen. Okay. How are we doing, everyone? I just want to confirm that everyone can see my screen okay, and we are good to go. Perfect. Let's do this. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Fiona, and today I'm going to be walking you through a few playbooks and ideas on how we can shake up the traditional meaning of a go-to-market strategy and look at what I consider to be our alternatives. So just to introduce myself, my name is Fiona. As I said, I am the Director of Product Marketing at a company called Unbounce. I'll be giving you a bit of context as to our story and what we do and giving you some examples. And really what I want to do today is look at how we can kind of mix up our known playbooks and continue to grow our products, differentiate in our known markets, increase market fit, but without any product roadmaps required. As we always try to balance the need to market and sell with innovate, sometimes those tensions show up. So how can we break past some of those limitations on always relying on new functionality to have our growth, differentiation, and market fit? That's what we're going to jump into today. So to kick things off, I do kind of want to give you a little bit of context as to how we've used some of these strategies at Unbounce. So if you're familiar with Unbounce, we came to market approximately 10 years ago. This is a pretty retro-looking original landing page and website that we have. I think Pep was familiar with us back in these days. And these were the good old days of SaaS marketing, right? If you're familiar with Scott Brinkley's research, this is back in 2010 when we were in a market of approximately 100 MarTech SaaS companies on the scene. You can really age this time by that vintage Twitter logo in the corner. But what we're going to do is then fast forward approximately 10 years, and I'm sure you're familiar with this view and this experience, but MarTech is a bit more like this, right? We've jumped from that sweet spot of having about 100 competitors to having about 8,000 similar functions in the market. Landing page builders, which is Unbounce's traditional product suite, we're now a dime a dozen, right? Platforms are key. It's a super saturated market, and this isn't just for MarTech. This is, I'm sure, symbolic of many, many industries. And so with a growth rate of 100 competitors to over 8,000, that is super, super terrifying. And it's super clear, and you've all identified this, that playbooks have to evolve as our market evolves, as our industries evolve, and as our customers evolve. So what we're going to do is take on that traditional go-to-market strategy on really leaning on new, competing, or parity features in products to capture our audiences. And we're in it also an era where functions like product marketing and customer marketing, we have teams in our companies that are equipped to help us pivot and help us get creative and not just lean on our product team so they can continue to innovate at their own pace and not at our go-to-market speed that we need to be doing. So how have we dealt with this at Unbounce? So right now, we're kind of trying to shake things up by not relying on our traditional market fit of our landing page platform, but establishing a net new product category, right? This is a bold move. It's pretty scary, but we're trying to establish a new product category that we're calling a conversion intelligence platform. With this, we're aligning that with the new packaging, a new target customer, alternative pricing. And of course, our product team are integral in us bringing this to life. But we're also going to lean into a lot of non-product tenets to make sure that we can grow, establish market fit, and really differentiate. So I'm going to walk you through some of these ideas that we've leaned into, and hopefully today you can come away with 3 different playbooks and 9 different experiments that you can incorporate into alternative go-to-market frameworks. So we're going to go through leading one playbook that focuses on category creation. So this is leading your company and or your product to success through a new category for an existing product. So like I said, no new product or functionality delivery is required. The second playbook we're going to look at is taking a really customer-centric approach. And I know that we all like to think that we are customer-centric in many, many things that we do. However, this is going to be really leaning on our target customer for our road to success and looking at new avenues that we can use that leverage our existing customers or similar customers to acquire net new business and unlock that growth. And then finally, we're going to look at more of a competitive positioning playbook. And to be clear, when I talk about competitive positioning, this isn't about being reactive to your competitors, but being truly differentiated and identifying your new unique place in the market. So with that, I'm going to kick things off. At first, we're going to look at, like I said, category creation. So I think there's like a really old adage, especially in SaaS, that build it and they will come. But what we're really seeing is that if you can effectively build a new product category, you're more likely to see that growth. So I believe in a recent study, 13% of Fortune 100's fastest growing companies were actually category creators. And while 13% doesn't sound like a huge amount, they actually accounted for 74% of the group's market cap. So that's like a pretty good ROI for taking this leap of faith and trying to differentiate. And so we're going to jump into some ways that you can perhaps look to establishing a category without having to deliver new features or value. So first off, the first step I would recommend would be looking to design your narrative. So I'm going to lead with just a bit of an example. So imagine you're trying to sell or launch a CRM, right? You know, a very, very functional, useful tool in any online SaaS business or even in our day-to-day. And so with the CRM that you're trying to launch or sell, you want to bring yourself to market by telling a story, perhaps about how you save time, how you capture more leads and increase sales. So that's a very, very similar story that I've heard, I'm sure you've all heard regarding CRMs. But imagine now, instead of saying that you're a CRM, maybe say you're going to bring to market something like a revenue acceleration platform. Okay, what does that mean? Maybe not everyone knows immediately what you mean by that, but maybe if you kind of look at who you're trying to pitch or sell your revenue acceleration platform to, perhaps sales and marketing, you can create a story that really speaks to them and allows them to imagine what your new product category will mean to them. So for this revenue acceleration platform, why don't we lean into the shortcomings of their existing experiences with CRMs and talk about the change in the world they're going to experience? So we could talk about lead quality alignment. We could talk about reducing the cultural friction between sales and marketing teams. We can even start to talk about shared wins, right? This goes above and beyond that feature set. It goes above and beyond that standard positioning, and it really starts to design a unique narrative that aligns with your unique product category. So that could stand out, right? So it's not about what you have, it's about how you make people feel about it. At Unbounce, when we talk about a conversion intelligence platform, that's net new. It might sound a bit abstract, a bit overwhelming. But when we break it down, what we're really talking about is balancing marketing intelligence and a marketer's know-how with artificial intelligence. So that's a bit more interesting and something that we don't hear people talking about a lot. So narratives really help you position your customer in that experience, not just placing them in the product. And you can do that with absolutely whatever product offering you have today. Next up, we're going to talk about, once you've identified the category that you want to create, you've started to design your narrative, it's not only enough to do that, right? With something net new, you need to also create demand as well as capturing it. So as you know, as with the theme of this talk, we know that CAC is going up. So it is so hard to capture your customers. So you really need to create that demand too. We have a lot of great products lost in really saturated market categories. And we're always going to have customers looking for better experiences and solutions. So if we look at the impact of experimenting with new keywords associated with categories, you can lightly, accelerate that growth opportunity by leaning into unique keywords that align with your unique category. If we think about some of the greatest inventions of our time, I'm probably going to use Spanx for this example. Had Spanx not veered out of that mass category of undergarments and evolved into shapewear, they wouldn't have created a whole new vertical that has competition, but also opportunities for others to come to market and grow. So once again, you create your category, you need to not only bring it to market, you need to create that demand, and then you need to capture it. If you, like me, have been in a position where you're trying to define go-to-market strategy and you've heard internally or from your peers or from, some of your teams that we've nothing new to launch, why are we going to market? If that's something that you're familiar with, this I would recommend would be the one key takeaway from today. By decoupling your go-to-market roadmap and your product roadmap, you can unlock exponential ways of experimentation and growth. If you lead with value, storytelling, and existing features, sure, it might sound frisky and it might sound terrifying, but you can do this before you launch new value or after new value. You can unlock early adopters and also laggards for your technology. So by decoupling your go-to-market roadmap from your product roadmap, you can really have the means of experimenting more with your channels, experimenting more with your target customers, while also allowing your product team to continue to focus on innovation at their own pace and speed. Awesome. So after looking at category creation, I'm going to look to a playbook that focuses on customer centricity. And as I mentioned before, we do all like to believe that we're customer centric in all of our strategies. But what about if we use the idea of customer centricity as a key lever for accelerating our market fit? As I said, this is without adding new features or relying on closing gaps to establish that market fit. But how can we do this by unlocking value within our existing customer base and similar audiences? So first of all, I would recommend that we start to look at leaning into net new verticals. We know that the idea of one-size-fits-all marketing is long and dead, and that relevance truly is key in how we deliver value to market. Consumer expectations are also changing rapidly, and so people really want to feel special. So by focusing on personalized channel marketing and messaging, you can unlock not only further penetration in your known verticals, but you can unlock customer bases in similar verticals. So I'm going to use another example. So say we have a document management system, and say you primarily target healthcare professionals due to your core value proposition of security and accessibility. So you're happy in your known vertical, it's safe, it's comfortable, you have pretty good product market fit. But if you take a look deeper into the current segmentation of your customer base, maybe you might see that 10% of your customers are actually in legal. But also, let's dig into that a bit more. You might see that they have higher ARPA, they have lower cost of acquisition, and they have a pretty notable retention rate. So that really looks like an opportunity for go-to-market expansion without any product change needed. If you can really identify a layer deeper of value propositions that connect with that legal base while continuing to sell this product that was originally targeted at healthcare professionals, that is an amazing way to run some vertical-based experiments and an amazing way to accelerate your go-to-market strategy. I think this is a really strong, concept that we all are aiming for in all our products and industries, right? This concept of product market fit more traditionally is one that we've heard a lot about and spoke of. Whether, you define product market fit in your organization of reaching that ideal 40 score in a product market fit survey, or whether it's just that feeling that your product is working and resonating with your market, message market fits are actually a really amazing way to fill experiments in terms of finding that market fit without changing your product in the absolute slightest. Obviously, as a product marketer by trade, messaging is something that I really advocate for. And I believe that it's a huge way we can advocate for our greater customer needs and showcase our compassion in the market, again, without having to rely on changes or expensive strategy pivots within our product. Obviously, Winter is an amazing tool for this. There's also other ways that you can do to further validate your message in the market. And again, when we talk about market, this could be within your existing customer base or within customers you have yet to acquire. Running surveys on your product community, if you have one, is a great way to further validate your message, or even running polls on social is also a good way to figure out, are you going in the right direction? Are there themes that you should lean into more? And how can you showcase your compassion, as I said, for your target customer without having to update your roadmap? And our last stop in our customer-centric playbook is what I would call a more traditional go-to-market strategy, but one I feel like we don't talk about enough unless we are using it in the context of unlocking international markets or more risky verticals. By looking at means of landing and expanding within similar or new customer bases, this is a really, really great way to experiment and lead change. So one thing I would love to see us doing more is talking about landing and expanding in our day-to-days and running these experiments, again, without having them associated with risky verticals or with international or unknown markets. I would love people's thought on this if they have any as well. So as we go into our final playbook, we are going to be talking a little bit about leveraging some competitive positioning to further unlock our differentiation opportunities in the markets. And so when I talk about competitive positioning, like I said, this doesn't mean being reactive to competitors around you. I know that from philosophers to business strategists, focusing on competitors can sometimes be futile and we just get distracted and focus on incorrect competitors as well. But comparison is a really, really powerful motivator for action. And just as humans, we just have this innate drive to evaluate ourselves in comparison to others. And we also just have an easier time understanding the world through relative versus absolute terms. And so when we leverage competitors for benchmarks, it really helps us compartmentalize our thoughts and really find a clear path to action. So with some of that psychology in mind, I'm going to talk about 3 different experiments that you can run to really competitively position yourself with your go-to-market strategy. One of my favorite topics is pricing. So I could spend all day talking about this, but I'm just going to give a quick pitch on how you can use pricing to be competitive. And I don't just mean using a competitive pricing model exclusively. That, of course, is an option. And there's 3 common pricing models that we frequently see in SaaS that have so many experimentation levers within them. You can obviously look to cost plus pricing, which is a means of adding up all the costs and then adding a profit margin. However, this isn't really aligned with the value that a customer receives, and this really isn't aligned with a customer's willingness to pay. So something that we're seeing trend-wise phasing out a little bit. Competitive pricing itself is allowing you to use a competitor as a benchmark. However, one thing to call out is that this is making the assumption that your competitors have done their homework. If they haven't done their due diligence and don't understand your target customer as best they do, this is not a wise strategy. One trend that we definitely are seeing in SaaS more and more frequently, there's so much great content out there on value-based pricing. If you reference a lot of OpenView's content, they've really, really good stuff. Value-based pricing is based on how much your target customer believes that your product is worth. And so as the value of your product increases, you can increase the price, but you can also increase the likelihood to retain your customer as well. And then in terms of what we're talking about today, creating an alternative go-to-market without any additional product functionality, I want to bust a myth that is, you can experiment with value-based pricing without adding more value. This just needs a value metric. And so you can future-proof your product against competition by looking at what is proprietary value to you today or value that you want to achieve in the future, set your price point that aligns with that value, and then create white space to further innovate on your product ahead of your competition. So that's something that I feel is a really, really great thing to experiment with. Secondly, then looking at packaging. I know that Chris kind of touched on this to a degree with the similar philosophy of modular asset building, but you can repurpose and repackage your product again without leveraging any changes. And I know a lot of times when we think about SaaS, you might say, Fiona, in order to repackage my product, I do need product to support, but not necessarily. If we're truly talking about leveraging go-to-market strategies, you can look into a bit of a product-led growth strategy. You can identify value that you can and should be delivering by experimenting with net new packages. So one thing that I would recommend would be, say if you have a lot of competition that are heading down market, they have simpler offerings at lower prices, but you don't know if that's a chance that your company should take. Why not? I'm going to use a more clear example. You have a marketing platform. You see competitors going downstream and you say, maybe we can launch just like a simple freemium form tool. Why not launch that on Product Hunt and see, what the demand is. What are people's responses to this either, lower priced or a more simple tool that you could use as a gateway to acquire more customers. By simply having a CTA to learn more, get early access, this is really a low cost means of experimenting with this go-to-market strategy of repackaging your product, again, without having to validate too much on the product side in advance. And finally, to wrap up, I'm going to go into our final experiments of positioning, which again, of course, is such an amazing way to shake up your go-to-market strategy without investing in your product. And also ensuring that you're constantly experimenting with your positioning can also kind of keep your competitors on their toes a good bit. Oftentimes we focus on our competitors and see what they're doing with their positioning, but this is one of those instances that I would say disregard them and stay focused on yourself and your ability to innovate and to experiment with how you position yourself, being laser focused on that target customer. This is something that can be done pretty easily with different campaigns, or maybe it is on your core website, but something that I would always advise that you do with ads on sales calls. And again, Winter is a really, really great tool to understand with target customer what positioning is working or has potential in advance of any changes going live. So with that, I'd love to wrap it up. I know we kind of blasted through a lot of concepts, a lot of experiments, and a few different playbooks this morning. So thank you, or this afternoon or evening, wherever you are. So that is just my take on how to design an alternative go-to-market strategy that allows you to continue to focus on growth, market fit, and differentiation without the need for a product roadmap.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Fiona.
Yeah, no
A
worries.
couple of follow-up questions here. So
Cool.
let's say I run one of these experiments.
Mhm.
When do I know the experiment is done? Like I have a conclusive result, like whether it failed or worked or whatever.
Totally. Yeah, I knew this question was going to come up. I was like, do we have time to talk about tracking and metrics here? So I think it really depends, right? I think that as anything, even if you go back to those goals that I talk about, whether you're focusing on growth, whether you're focusing on differentiation, or whether you're focusing on market fit, within those three pillars, I would assume that you have goals for your greater business in mind. So if we use the example of growth and we look at the example of creating demand for a new product category, right? I think you could establish growth by looking at your current benchmarks for marketing qualified leads or new trial starts, understanding if there is demand and interest in, for example, this new product category, that you can then see, well, does this align more with what our overall growth goals are? Are we staying consistent with what our current growth trends are, or are we failing abysmally? I think experimentation is obviously a really hot topic that, takes many, many forms. But I think that if you can benchmark your own business success based on your overall business goals, then you should be able to understand how that experiment fits in the greater scheme of things.
Well, let's say, to add on to this, let's say, I want to get more signups or whatever. Maybe that's my success metric. And like, if I look at my, typical week over week signups, and now it's up 5%, how will I know whether it's because of the change I made, or maybe there's a novelty effect that is like it's a temporary bump, or maybe it's normal fluctuation? Like, what would you do in that scenario? Let's say it's 5% up, better results. Do we like say, hey, yes, more of this, or nah, scrap it?
Totally. I think that's I'm going to give an annoying answer, and I would say that depends. I think obviously in advance of doing any experiment, you need to form a hypothesis and take into account all the variables that could contribute to the success of your experiment. So say if we're looking at a new category launch experiment, and we're trying to understand how can we assess the impact of that change in and of itself. In advance of rolling out any changes, I would look at average seasonality, average trends and signups, and probably sources of traffic as well. Maybe there's a different channel that you're experimenting, or other experiments that are going on simultaneously, and then understand, is your experiment going to be impact based or time based, so that you can then identify either maybe that's a point that we pause the experiment, or that's the point where we fully stop the experiment. But understanding if you're looking at impact or time, even as check-in points, I think that can really identify if you're going in the right direction.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, I would add on from just my personal experience. I think like the more change in the business the experiment outcome requires, the more data, the more sure you want to be that this is
Exactly.
really happening because of my change. And if it's inconsequential, then like the margin of error can be higher, you know. So then it's like, probably better. Sure, let's go with it, you know. But if it's
Exactly.
like, category creation would be major change of direction. So you want to be absolutely fucking sure. All right,
It changes your
Daniel is
business
asking.
model for sure.
Yes. Daniel is asking here, how do you see the balance between a new country landing versus local expanding in the message fit framework?
So can we repeat that? I'm just going to look it up here.
Yeah, so
How do we see the balance between new country landing versus local expanding?
so I think it's like you're expanding to another region inside the same country versus going to a new country. I guess localization would matter for this business for some reason.
For sure. I definitely would approach them as very different strategies and different experiments, right? New vertical expansion, I think, is a really great means of taking, like I said, your existing product and looking at that target customer. And then that's where you would need to do your research upfront to understand maybe any variance from your existing customer base and map out a series of positioning experiments, right? The research you likely have done for your current positioning is probably based on existing customers, existing geographies. So all that could be similar or it could be different. So when looking at vertical expansion, I think you have the baseline identification of the opportunity, which maybe is showing up, like I said before, in okay, we have a small sprinkling of those customers in our current customer base. They have healthy key SaaS metrics. We believe there's an opportunity there. So what I would do would run a series of, say, ad campaigns or click-through campaigns in that geography with a series of different positioning and core messaging so that you can then start to understand what is the click-through rate or higher performance of those different experiments. And then I would do some more further validation in that particular region again. So kind of doing like a series of phased research and validation experiments almost. There's definitely no silver bullet for these things, especially if you decide, there's going to be huge investment for your company to go international or to unlock new verticals. So you do want to do a lot of that research and validation upfront, but there's tons of different experiments that you could do to support with that.
Thank you. Last question, 1 minute left. How would you map all the different angles you could have to position your company? There are endless options. So how to map them and how to then bring them down to best options?
How would you map all the different angles you have to position your company? So positioning in and of itself is, I think, if you're familiar with a lot of April Dunford's philosophies, we have that traditional way of viewing positioning as a positioning statement that says what you are, what your product category is, what your competitor is, and that is your position. I think that's a pretty antiquated way of looking at it. And really what your positioning is as a combination of at least 6 different factors, from looking at your unique value, looking at your competitor, looking at your target customer, looking at your price point. And there's actually like a sequence of, there's about 6 different inputs that you want to consider when you're thinking about positioning. And there's actually a sequence of ways that you then want to identify, go into those different components that will help you narrow down to what your most important way to position is. I'm happy to kind of add some slides to this deck as well on that particular question, because I feel like I'm doing a poor job of answering that we could share as well after this, if that makes sense.
Appreciate it, Fiona. So thank you so much. Scott, we didn't get your question, so hit Fiona up on LinkedIn. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much.